Early on, I was having problems with the creation of hair as close cropped as her shocking, you know, in her younger years she had hair piled on top of her head as is appropriate for the time, but then she cut it all off, and it was graying at that time, and I couldn't figure out what I had in the way of material to create that image. So I just had the fun of I tried to make her stolid, you know, and broad, but somehow or other, with that little hat on, it's her in her younger years. So that was my conflict. But all in all, I think she's worthy of being seen, and the scene itself is fun. So that's what I'd have to say about Gertrude. And as far as choosing Gertrude Stein, her life as a woman and her accomplishments in the field of literature and opera, she wrote at least 2 operas with Virgil Thomson. I mean, all of this makes her more than worthy. And it was just fun being able to catch her in a playful mood rather than in the stern and didactic salon and war struggle and revolutionary. You know, there was a lot of trouble with her publishing, and she chose to take the language and make it her own. So here we have "A rose is a rose is a rose." And there's Gertrude playing with Basket and little Pepe, her chihuahua, in a very human rather than exalted period. We come to May Sarton, who also lived to a ripe old age, but her latter years spent living alone in a 3-story house on the cliff in York, Maine, through all of the changes of weather. Her cat, her friends, her journal, her garden were the things she most treasured at this age. The last journal that she wrote was at 82. The many, many novels, the poetry, the eloquence of her thoughts and words were always reflected in a simple human, identifiable form in her journals. I chose to picture May, not from any photograph that I saw particularly, but from some of the notations in her journal. of the vicissitudes of the weather and the snow in winter, and taking care of things and getting out and seeing that the birds were fed and hoping that the deer didn't come and steal all of the food that was put out for the birds, because it was difficult for them to forage in the snow, beneath the snow, and in among the few little weeds that would poke through. So I put May, with her graying hair and warm knit, bundled up in warm knit clothes, odds and ends from around my studio. I just cut and sew and wrapped her all up. And I chose to show her toting out the trash in the snow and meeting eye to eye with the deer that had been eating all of her bird food. In order for a woman to write, she must first have money, but more important, a room of one's own. And when it came to delineating and including Virginia in this project, I had the best time imaginable giving her a room of her own. I've been able to include my mother's antique napkin from her linens and a wonderful Art Nouveau figure that I've had for a long time that was actually a lowly bottle opener. And I've been able to include a younger picture of Virginia in her youth. And I've given her her book, which she's in the process of writing, a room of her own, her pens, her money, and the keys, the key to Virginia's sheltered, somewhat sheltered life. Small keys, large keys, the key to the castle. And I hope that I have been able to capture that long, aristocratic, English, high-complexioned visage in her face. I know I had fun with her clothes and her jewels and all of the small accoutrements, and particularly creating an old chest from a decrepit piece that I found in a thrift shop, beat up. I covered it in velvet and stuffed it with her own personal knits. I think they reflect the colors in her garment, the old tapestry images and colors in the weavings of the rug on the floor. I learned a lot about proportion when I sat her in a chair at the table, and the chair was out of proportion, and with the help of my teacher and her husband, we were able to whack an inch off each of the legs and still keep it all intact. So there's Virginia. This is an image of a woman of my local community, but a woman who belonged to the world because she fought the good fight. Barbara McDonald lived to her 87th year and just died in San Diego a few months ago, last June. Her partner, her life partner, Cynthia Rich, and Barbara often lectured together and wrote together and lived a glorious life together, both here in the city, but preferably and joyously in the desert in Agua Caliente, in a beautiful trailer. Barbara wrote a significant, often reprinted at least 3 times, book entitled Look Me in the Eye. It spoke of aging, old women, and ageism. When I first encountered Barbara, we had worked the entire year prior to that, all through 1986, meeting each month a group of avid, enlightened, loving, caring women, talented women who wanted to make a space for old women in the lesbian community throughout the United States. After thrashing out the whole subject of age and aging and creating a cutoff period of 60, the age chronologically of 60 and over 200 women gathered from all over the United States on the campus of one of the state college branches. Right now I can't think of it. It'll come to me. At any rate, it was just outside of Los Angeles, outside of Long Beach, as a matter of fact. And it was an extremely successful and enlightening conference, and Barbara was the keynote speaker. From that juncture, 1967, 77, 87, 97, plus 30-odd years, my association and interaction with Barbara and Cynthia has changed my life, influenced my life, and influenced many women around me. And particularly appreciative I've been in the wisdom that she imparted about recognizing and combating ageism in society in general, and in the lesbian community in particular. We were not immune. Not only were old women cast out as no longer useful after menopause, when babies could no longer be born and birthed, but they were many times not heard, not seen, ignored. Their wisdom and their accumulated education were not appreciated and utilized. Again, cast aside, no longer as jazzy dancing partners or bed partners. Their use totally and fully denigrated, denied, and downtrodden. This may seem like a bleak picture, and in some cases, in the larger scale of things, not very important. But that's because for years, women in general have suffered this fate. But it is doubly disastrous when they reach further years, when they're able to live and explore in their later years certain talents, certain information, certain wisdom, and it's ignored. Barbara proved to be the perfect example and candidate for this exhibit. What she stood for, how she lived her life, the bravery, the honesty, and her stirring presence wherever she was invited to speak. She left an indelible mark. And believe me, there is one indelible mark on my heart for Barbara. I showed her, typically speaking to a large audience. I took the liberty of adding my own personal collection of fun buttons of various causes that I collected over the years. And I put them in a little cart behind her podium so that our respective political consciousness would be amply reflected in this daring and bold piece. Martha Graham always, and her company, always stood out. And as far as this exhibit is concerned, there's a big difference between Anais dancing for personal joie de vivre and the presentational serious dance. One of the interesting facts that I discovered in my research was that she had a very special designer for the clothing that she used on stage. And she always felt that she needed to look beautiful on stage. And I tried to do that for her. Again, I reiterate, I am not a pattern maker. I am not a sewer. I am not a designer. I'm simply a recycler. And I had the good fortune to find an old piece cut off from the bottom, obviously, of a wedding dress that was already machine sewn and Pellon lined. And as you see, this cannot be achieved without some kind of inner support. So there was a long stretch of it, and I just took it, wrapped it, tacked it, stitched it, and suddenly there was a garment worthy of the beauty of the body and the dance that Martha Graham has given to the world. And I wanted to also show the elegance of movement, not only of her body, but that it replicated nature itself. And that's why I included that small bit of greenery on her stage. I wish that I could have presented the entire company and the entire piece, but if you have interest personally in modern dance, you can find it in every city in the United States and across the suburbs, and Martha Graham was a significant influence in the direction of that dance from early on. Hands were both an interesting and a challenging project. I had no idea of how to construct them to give them a realistic, non-claw-like appearance, this aspect. And I thought, well, we'll talk about it briefly, and there'll be some suggestions, and it shouldn't be all that difficult. I was totally amazed that constructing them with wire and batting and a nylon skin covering, and then positioning them with respect to the musculature and the bone structure, the many, many interesting bones of the hand. could occupy 3 intensive days of labor. And that's exactly what's been happening here. We started out taking a large sheet of paper and laying my very own hand down and drawing like kindergarten, round and round and round. And then we walked over to poor Joe, the executor of computer mastery and miracles, and he took that sheet and reduced it down to just a very, very small 1/4 proportional scale. And then we took this little wooden board and some small brads, and at each important juncture there was a placement so that wire could be stretched and formed consistently for each hand, then to be removed and wrapped and nyloned and sewn together. Experience and knowledge could be adapted to the start, the difference, the really large difference in inception and conception and beginning. Do you think that what exists there could be salvaged, or does it need to be trashed? That's an answer that I would be interested in.
Well, if you wanted to change these hands, the obvious thing is to cut them off and put a new hand on here.
Well, is that minor scale besides lumps and bumps, or is that near it?
Let me tell you what's better.
All right.
Okay, what's better is this part of the hand.
Right.
Is more in proportion to the fingers than this part of the hand is in proportion to these fingers.
Got that.
Okay. She's standing here to speak, and her hands are a very prominent part of this piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this hand that looks more natural is less distracting, and therefore a better choice.
Agreed. And I see it clearly now.
I think the fact that you make a cut here and you attach this to this is going to be less distracting than leaving the hand.
Then what do we do about color?
I wouldn't worry about it. I think that's less distracting than this hand is, than leaving this hand. In other words, this calls more attention than the change in color is going.
Now, I think what we're missing here is, I didn't realize it was gone, but that's...
She holds a mic.
She was, well, well now, see, that's the whole idea here.
Is that she holds the microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But see, this hand, that
Now,
makes it even more important because now the hand is doing something that's really drawing attention to itself, and it should be as good as you can make it.
Got it. Got the message. Well, this has been a revelation and a great lesson, and leaves me with the feeling that I would like to back up about 7 months and 12 dolls and take an axe to 24 hands lop them off and start all over again. But I